Today on VLAMP, we're talking about the Freelance Isn't Free Act. Welcome everyone to VLAMP, video, lighting, audio, music, and photography. I'm of course your host, Matt Haslam, and today we're talking about something really amazing that New York City did. It's a law that they just passed called the Freelance Isn't Free Act, and we're going to be talking about it at length, but before we get to that, this is Season 5 of the show, which is incredible that we made it to Season 5. This is also Episode 93, so this season we're going to hit our 100th episode, and I highly suggest you tune in for that, so please do subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for the 100th episode special of this show. It's going to be amazing, and I cannot wait to produce that show. But that is 7 episodes away, and today we're talking about the Freelance Isn't Free Act. Now, New York City has a gigantic problem. Basically, if you don't know, 1/3 of New York City's workforce is actually freelance. So, basically, that means that 2/3 go into work every day and they get a paycheck at the end of the week, which is great. That's how most of the world works, right? But in New York City, 1/3 of their workforce goes into work and they have no idea if they're going to get paid or not. They're not guaranteed a paycheck at the end of the week from a company. They have to write contracts constantly. And they're working on a per day, per diem basis of, I'm going to do this for you and you're going to pay me this much. That's what freelance is. It's not free. There's a reason why I joke around a lot about the word freelance. And I joke around about just dropping the letter R from the word and calling it freelance instead. Because freelance has this connotation that goes alongside it of freelance should be free because free's in the word. Well, yes, it is in the word. And how can you argue that? But if you suddenly called it freelance instead, then people should understand that there's going to be a fee involved. And so basically 1/3 of the workforce in New York City is on this plan that they constantly write contracts and they're constantly trying to collect from different people. Why is that? Well, because a lot of New York City is construction and different industries that, let's say you're an iron worker and they don't need iron workers every day for a building project. Some days they need a drywall person. Some days they need, I don't really know construction, a concrete worker. Some days they don't need every single position to be there. Once the building's up, they need drywall people. And they need, furniture people. They don't really need the iron workers and concrete workers anymore, So you're on a freelance basis where today you're working for this company over here on Fifth Avenue today, and tomorrow you might be working over across the city on another project because you're an iron worker or you're a concrete worker or whatever you are. It's fine, but they don't always need you every day. And so you're on a freelance basis. Other industries as well. I'm just talking about construction because it's easier to talk about. You can be in fashion and do the same thing. It all depends on what industry you want to be in New York City. And basically, you're freelance. You go from spot to spot, and you write contracts all the time. So 1/3 of New York City's workforce is on this plan, on this freelance way of living. So there's no guarantee of payment besides a contract. And before when this law was enacted, 70% reported by the Gothamist, which, by the way, reported this whole story, and other newspapers and articles reported it now, but initially reported by the Gothamist, which is, from what I can tell, a reputable source. And even if it's not, there's other news companies that are backing this up now that are reputable. So 70% of those freelancers report issues collecting from their customers, which is kind of crazy. So 70% of the 1/3 workforce have problems collecting. Now, it doesn't say that they don't ever collect. It just says that they have problems. They report issues. So some of that 70% might be able to collect eventually, but it's hard to collect. And I want to talk about why in just a second, but 70% of your freelance workforce report issues. And finally, New York City did something about this, which is incredible that they did. This is to be admired of New York City lawmakers. Let me make that very clear. They went ahead and protected freelancers and said, no, this isn't happening anymore. But why people think that they can hire someone and not pay them is baffling to me, right? You know, you can hire an iron worker and say, I need you to work this. I'm going to sign the contract to say, yeah, I'm going to pay you this much, but then never pay you. It baffles my mind, right? You work for a company or you're a company yourself and you don't pay freelancers, which, you know, you need freelancers to do what you do. And so you think to yourself, well, eventually these freelancers are going to stop working for me. And because I'm not paying anybody, right? They're going to eventually stop working and I'm going to stop getting my projects done. Unfortunately, a lot of freelancers do the work anyway because they think, you know, eventually I'll get paid from them. It's okay. I need to do work every day in order to make money, and hopefully one day I'll collect on this. So in reality, the issue never stops. These companies that don't pay, or these people that don't pay, keep getting the work done for them, and it never stops getting done for them because these freelancers all have this fallacy that they're going to get paid one day. Or they just keep getting new freelancers because that's what freelance is. It's not a permanent position, right? So they keep getting this work done for them by other people and keep turning over people and saying, well, if Steve won't work for me, well, then Dave will work for me today, you know? So what? And even if this other person over here has a higher price, who cares? Because they're not going to pay you anyway. But here's where New York City came in. And they said, this isn't happening anymore. If, in fact, you had a contract with a freelancer before the work was done, you have 30 days to pay. That is it. You have 30 days to pay this freelancer as long as the contract is over $800. This law can be enforced. And the way I believe this law to work, from what I've read, basically you can report the issue. If you're a freelancer, you can say XYZ company or this person that hired me isn't paying me. It's over $800 contract. And by the way, it's the contract that has to be over $800, not per day. If you're working for someone and your gross amount, even including your cost, is over $800, it's included in this law. It can be enforced by this law. For instance, if you're doing a construction project and 50% of what you collect is actually your cost involved, well, even if you're only making $400 and your contract is for $800, it can be enforced by this new law. So it's not necessarily what you're getting in profit in $800. It's $800 total and gross, which is great. But basically, if you say if you're a freelancer and your customer didn't pay you within 30 days and the contract's over $800 in gross, then you can go to the local police station and you can say, here's my contract with this person or this company. They didn't pay me. Simple as that. Then you go home, back to your normal way of living, and the police handle it from there. Maybe there will be a report that you have to file with them or whatever to say, here's the situation, but that's it. The police will handle it 100% from there on. All you have to do is go home and wait for the check to come in the mail, which is fantastic, by the way, because during our current way of doing things, for at least the rest of the country, as of the date of this recording, the way the rest of the country works and the way New York City worked before this is it's a huge hassle to collect from your customers if they don't pay you on time. Let me be clear. 99% of every all customers out there are going to pay you on time, no problems, no questions asked. They know they signed a contract beforehand. They're perfectly fine. But sometimes you'll run across that person or that company that doesn't want to pay you. And basically, the current way you have to deal with things is you first say to them, hey, payment is due today or payment is due tomorrow or whatever, just to remind you. It's a simple, friendly reminder, whatever, right? Which is perfectly fine. Normally, people will pay you for that and say, oh, thanks for reminding me. I completely forgot. Okay, that's fine. I typically give them a couple days and say, if you're a little bit late, here's a reminder. And if they're late a little bit, they typically say, well, I completely forgot to send out the check. I'm really sorry. Here you go. Fine. That is absolutely fine. Now, I'm not saying it's fine that they're late. I'm just saying people do forget because you are working on a freelance basis and not every person you work for is used to having bills. Sometimes you're working for a person that typically doesn't hire videographers or photographers or whatever you're doing that day. Other times you're working for agencies and big companies that, they have a whole billing department that they can, here, send your invoice along and, they pay you and everything's fine. That whole department of the company or the organization just pays bills. That's all they do. So they're used to it. Whereas somebody, maybe mom and dad, maybe aren't used to that. And I mean, they have bills obviously, but they're maybe not used to having a videographer bill to pay on top of their rent or whatever else they have that month. So sometimes it is a little bit harder than others. But right now, the way it works is that if person's not paying you and, they're not responding to you, the most you can do right now is say to them, if you don't pay me, I'm going to take you to court. Or I'm going to issue a 1099. Let me explain how that works. The first way is you can take them to court and you can file a lawsuit against them. And then basically, by the way, it does cost you to file a lawsuit against someone. I believe no matter where you live in the country, I know here it does cost you to file a lawsuit. Luckily, we've never had to do that because our customers are good people. And we choose our customers because they are reputable and they are good people. And we know the warning signs of, yeah, they're not going to pay us, so let's not work for them. Or sometimes we'll say to them, you're going to pay 75% deposit instead of a 50% deposit just because I've seen a warning sign or two from this customer, and that way I'm getting paid at least something. And, if they don't ever pay the 25%, it's bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. So luckily I've never had to do that. I hope I never have to do that, but it does cost to file a lawsuit against someone. And let's say you go through the whole process. You might need legal representation. It will cost you time and money to keep up with that lawsuit and to file everything, to keep on it, and go to court and tell the judge, here's the contract. It's gonna cost you money. If you do need legal representation or help with it, or help with your case from legal experts or something, it does cost you for that. But it also costs you time away from other work. And here's where New York City did something incredible because of this law. And that is, normally if you take someone to court or any of this, it takes a lot of time to collect from all of these customers that aren't paying, especially if 70% of your customers aren't paying, which is what's happening in New York City. So it takes a lot of time to collect that money. Whereas, and that time, remember, time is irreplaceable. It's not like money that you can just get more of it, or property that you can just get more of it if you need. Time is time. So if you're working over here trying to collect from all these other customers, you're taking time away from other customers that are paying you and pay on time, have no problem at all. And so that's why this is a huge problem, because you're spending all this time collecting for money that is already owed to you. You've already spent the time to earn that money, and now you're spending even more time to collect on it. So in other words, eventually you have to start charging people more. And rather than charging X number of dollars, you now have to charge 2 times that in order to make it worth your while to go after and collect all that money from everyone. So it costs people more money to bring you in now. And slowly but surely, they're going to start choosing other freelancers who are less expensive. And now you're spending all your time collecting and none of your time actually working. So basically, the way this new law works in New York City is that it wouldn't be any more difficult to report someone not paying you than it would be to go down to your local police station and report a hit-and-run accident or something, right? So now you just give them a contract and say, here's what they agreed to pay me. They haven't paid me. You guys handle it from here. And that's all you have to do. So now companies and people who think they can take advantage of you because it's going to take you a lot of time and money to file the lawsuit against them, and it's going to take time away from other customers who are paying you, suddenly now that's not a problem anymore. Suddenly you can report anything and everything as long as it's over $800, which is a little high, but in New York City, probably every contract is over $800. So it's understandable. Maybe in other cities, such as where I live, maybe $100 would be more acceptable to be a minimum amount, because you don't want people reporting, oh, this person agreed to pay me $10 for this item at a yard sale. No, come on. Be serious. Yes, you should be able to collect, but it's only $10. Let it go, Whereas a freelancer who's working all the time, this is a way of living. So I think there should be somewhat of a minimum on this, but it makes it easier to collect. Honestly, with a lawsuit, people assume that it's not worth it to go after them sometimes. If they are freelancers themselves, or if they know how the system works, and they know how much time and money it's going to cost to go after them, they pretty much know if it's for anything less than $1,000, really, it's not worth it to go after them. Because what you'll collect isn't going to be enough to pay for all that time and money, right, that you spent to file the lawsuit. It's really not worth it. And unfortunately, people know that. So if your contract's for less than $1,000, sometimes you have that random person that isn't so nice and understands that and tries to take advantage of that. And I'm not going to lie and say that that's never happened to us. But I think once it happens to you, by the way, it only happened once. And I'm kind of in a way, happy that it happened to us very early on in our company, that someone decided not to pay us. Because now I'm much more skeptical. I'm much more skeptical of everyone. And it's unfortunate, but it's also good because now I have a contract that writes everything out. I have all the terms and conditions that say, you have to pay me this much by this date. Here's what I'm going to do for that amount, and then you pay me this much by this date. Everything's in writing now. So nothing can be disagreed upon it later, right? Before that point in my career where someone took advantage of my services, my contract was very dull. And honestly, it was very easy to take advantage of me at that point because barely anything was in writing. And I really didn't know the law. I didn't know how any of this worked. And so, in a way, yeah, I'm happy it happened to me early on because now I'm smarter for it. And now I've learned my lesson and I'm going to try my best not to have that happen again. But sometimes people do know that it's not worth going after them, which is unfortunate. But in a situation like this where it's the law now in New York City, suddenly now it is worth going after them, no matter what. And now they know they can't take advantage of you, which is fantastic. The other way that you can, encourage people to pay, and typically if you say to them, I'm going to file a lawsuit against you, typically 9 times out of 10, they'll say, fine, here's the payment. Don't file a lawsuit against us because that's public record. And soon enough, people will stop trusting us as a company or a person, So they typically pay if you basically threaten that to them in a last-ditch effort to get paid, basically. So typically they pay for that kind of thing. And that's what this law is going to be, by the way. It's not to say that anyone and everyone can go running to the police station after 30 days and not getting paid, right? Really, I don't think that's what this law is for. I think it's to intimidate people to pay on time. Because suddenly, this civil matter of, not paying on time, this civil lawsuit that's happening on a normal basis now becomes a criminal act if you don't pay your freelancers on time all the time. If you're a repeat offender, this becomes a criminal act, right? Because now it's a law. And so now people are more prone to pay because they're intimidated to pay. Not by you, by the government. And so now they pay on time, hopefully. If they don't, now it's a criminal act. If they don't pay regularly, right? The other side to this is the other way. You currently have to have a last-ditch effort for them to pay, which is another intimidation tactic typically, but it's basically by filing a 1099 with them. So if you know for a fact that this customer is never going to pay you, right? You just know it. And if it's over $600, if come on, be serious. It's been a year after it. They're never going to pay me this amount. What I could do as a freelancer is I can tell them, if you're not going to pay me, then I'm going to issue a 1099 on you. Now, typically how 1099s work is if, let's say, you pay out an amount over $600, you pay a freelancer or you pay a laborer, whoever really, besides like an employee. If you pay out a freelancer or a contractor for over $600, you can issue a 1099 for them, as long as they're not a corporation. If they're a corporation, the IRS thinks that they're trustworthy and they can never be wrong and they can never do anything wrong, so you don't have to issue a 1099 for them. But if they're a freelancer that's sole proprietor, or I believe an LLC or a partnership, then you can issue a 1099 for them. So the way it works is you say, I paid out over $600, and here's a 1099 that, I'm going to report that I had this expense, so you have to report to the IRS that you collected this amount from us. And that way, it's just a legal form to say, I want this amount reported, that this was an expense, and I want you to report that this amount was given to you in your taxes at the end of the year, which is perfectly fine. If you get paid over $600, you should have to pay taxes on it. I'm sorry, I don't really. I'm on the side of, hey, it is taxes. Whether or not you agree with taxes, that's the way the law works. You have to pay taxes right now. And until that law changes, 1099s are going to be around, right? And so that's the way a 1099 normally works. However, in this situation, if you have a customer that isn't paying you and you know for a fact they're not going to pay you, maybe they've even said they're not going to pay you, right? But if they keep ignoring you and you know you're not going to collect that money, what you can do as a freelancer is you can issue a 1099 on them. It's basically a reversal on the whole situation. You say, here's a 1099. I'm going to report that I collected this much. But then I'm also going to report that this was a loss for me, right? So I'm going to say to the IRS, it's as if I collect this much, but it's also a loss for me, and I'm going to report all my expenses on that I should have, where I did have on doing that job, but I never got paid for doing it, right? And I think if you're going to do this, maybe ask some counsel on it. For instance, an accountant or something. Your accountant should know about this. My accountant, or people I do work with for my accounting, know about it, and I'm really happy for that. We've never gotten to this point in my company where I had to do this, but it does offer another level of intimidation, because basically if you issue a 1099 to your customer, you're saying to the IRS, I'm never going to collect this amount. It ain't going to happen. Basically, it's kind of hard to explain, because you're saying that this person you worked for, your customer, has this 1099 and received this much of work, but they never paid out to get that work done. So you're saying that they received this amount in dollars, but in labor, right? You're saying to them, my customer received this work, but never paid me for that work. So they received it. Now they have to pay taxes on what they received, because receiving work is just as valid to the IRS as receiving money. So now they have to pay taxes to the IRS for receiving what services you gave them. And they don't necessarily like that, because if they paid you on time and they paid you what you asked them to pay you and they signed the contract for, then what you can do, what normally happens is they pay you and then they take that expense off their taxes at the end of the year. But if suddenly they receive a 1099 from you that you received this labor, but you never paid them, now they have to pay the IRS the taxes on whatever that amount was, which is a last-ditch effort to get paid and a last intimidation method that you can use as a freelancer. Because typically, they don't like dealing with the IRS. No one likes dealing with the IRS. Honestly, I don't even think the IRS likes dealing with the IRS. But they're going to be more intimidated by the IRS than they're ever going to be intimidated by you. I don't care if your small little company is as small as like a mom and pop shop or something, that you're just doing this out of your house maybe, or if you're Walmart, okay? Really, it doesn't matter. They're going to be more intimidated by the IRS than they're ever going to be intimidated by you. So That's another way to collect. But it shouldn't have to be. It should never get to that point, which is why this law is so fantastic in New York City, because it makes it so easy to collect. It makes it so easy to report the issue now. You just go down to your local police station and say, here's my contract. You file a little report, and then you go home and you wait for the check to be collected. Because no one, and I mean no one, likes the police showing up on their doorstep saying, you didn't pay this person, this freelancer, you have to pay them. And if they're a company that's doing this all the time, or a person that's doing this all the time, no one likes the police showing up at their doorstep every day. So it is also an intimidation of like, if you don't pay me on time, I'm going to report you. This is the way it's going to work. The real idea here that what I would love to see happen with this is if this was rolled out across the country. That would be amazing. Because this law suddenly gives validity to freelancers, to the whole career path of freelance. It offers that validity and says freelance is a freelance, not a freelance. It offers that validity of, yes, what you're doing is reputable. What you're doing is a career. It's not a thing where you can be taken advantage of anymore. And it's offering the validity that freelance isn't free. Sorry. The word spelling is wrong. Freelance isn't free. If this was rolled out across the country, I think one of my friends that I was talking to on this topic is right. It couldn't be a federal law because that's because every state has different laws in it. And I think if you made this a federal law, yes, that's great because now the FBI is involved, or now it's a federal issue of like now you're doing a federal offense instead of a state offense. But I think it would be really hard to make this a federal law. So I think what we need to do is have each state make this a law. But how would it help the whole country? Well, here's how. First off, if this was rolled out nationwide, it would help cut down on lawsuits, right? Because now, if you're a freelancer that isn't paid, you can report it to your police station and they handle it. And now you don't have to file a lawsuit for it. Now, lawsuits can be other things that may not have a contract to them. And now, the legal department, lawyers and the courts don't get backed up with all these lawsuits from freelancers because now they can concentrate on other more important things because now it's a law and the police are handling the freelancers not getting paid, right? And now that it's just as easy as reporting like a hit and run accident or something, now people can no longer take advantage of you just because they think, this amount isn't worth going after me in a lawsuit. It's not worth your time and your money to go after me and file this lawsuit. So people can be intimidated to pay more on time. And because it would be a criminal act if you don't pay multiple freelancers, and if you're reported a certain number of times, it would be a criminal act, which means they're going to be even more intimidated to pay you. Because now if, suddenly you don't pay 5 freelancers and 5 freelancers report you for not paying them, suddenly now you don't have to just pay, but you have to go to jail or something along those lines. Or you have to do community service or something, right? That's a huge intimidation factor that has to be accounted in here. If suddenly it's a criminal act, that's fantastic because no one wants to be charged with a criminal offense. So they're going to probably pay you on time. And that's what makes this law so brilliant. It offers that validity, but it also offers another level of intimidation that honestly, freelancers don't all have a team of lawyers behind them. We don't all have an office of people working full time to collect on contracts that, we're working on. Honestly, most freelancers are in a situation that they're out there working every day. And then on weekends, they come back and they do the office work. Or late at night when they're watching TV with the rest of their family, they're working on the paperwork for tomorrow's job. So now with this being a law, it offers so many more levels of intimidation that if you don't pay me, this is going to happen. I'm going to report you. If you don't pay me then, this is a criminal offense, so on and so forth. And so it's no longer this big company against this one guy freelancer. It's no longer this big company against this other big company. Whatever. Now it's even. Now, no matter what, if you're one person, you can take on a big company so easily, and you have the law on your side. And that's what makes New York City Freelance Isn't Free an incredible law that I think we should roll out. So here's what I want you to do. Normally on this show, especially during these podcast episodes, we talk about something wrong with the industry. And we say, here's how to solve it, right? Or we talk about just something bad that happened. Today we're talking about something that there actually could be a solution to. New York City has the solution. They've enacted this law, which is the solution, right? But now what we need to do is take this law and roll it out countrywide. So what I want you to do is contact your local state representative, state congressman, Senate member, whatever. Contact your local government and say, I want this law in my town. I want this law in my state. Sure, there might be differences in this law. For instance, in my local area, the law may not require an $800 minimum on a contract because honestly, most of the contracts in this area aren't going to be $800, They might be for my company, but they might not be for another company. So maybe there will be different minimums of, in your area, it's a small rural community. So the minimum would be $50 or $100, not $800, because the cost of living in your area isn't what it is in New York City or something. But if you live in Seattle or, Washington, D.C. or L.A. or Hollywood, then yeah, maybe you do have a minimum of $800 because, a day rate of someone working for a big studio in Hollywood is probably over $800. But in, Pennsylvania, the same couldn't be said. So contact your local lawmakers, tell them about this law, and say to them, and regardless of if you're in the film industry or the entertainment industry at all, if you're a construction worker and work freelance, even if you're not a freelancer and you have a friend who's a freelancer who, well, let's say you're a construction worker and right alongside you every day there's different freelancers working because they don't always need the same amount of people every day. So you're a full-time employee, but some of your friends are also freelancers working for the same company on the same jobs, and they're not with you every day because the company doesn't need everyone every day. Contact your local lawmakers and say, you know what, I'm not a freelancer, but I really believe in this law. And I want this implemented, right? Show people and the world that being a freelancer is a valid career path. Show them that no one can take advantage of you because you chose to work on a basis of, I want to do a different thing every day. I know for me at least, part of the reason why I chose to be a freelancer and do things the way I'm doing things is because being in an office every day is cool, but it's not what I want to do every day of my life. Doing the same exact task every day, even if I was a videographer every day, I honestly don't know if I would like it as much. I would still like it. I mean, don't get me wrong, but if I had to do video work every single day of my life and I can never do audio and lighting and photography and graphic design and all these different things that I'm able to do because I'm a freelancer, if I couldn't do all those things and do a different thing every day and show up to the office every day and go, what am I doing today? And today I'm working on a video project. Tomorrow I'm working on an audio project. If I couldn't do that, I don't know if I would be happy, or at least not as happy. So part of this law helps say that, yes, what I'm doing is a valid way of doing things, that I should be protected from people that don't want to pay, even though they signed a contract beforehand. Now, what's important about this is if you're a freelancer that doesn't ever have contracts, first off, you need them. Number two, you should have them, which I know is the same thing. But the way this law works is that you need something in writing to say that they were supposed to pay you this amount before the service was provided. And I'm sorry if you're one of those people that write invoices out after you did the work and just say, I'm going to do the work, but I'm going to write the invoice later. Then no, I'm sorry. Maybe you should still be paid for that, but if you did things properly, you would have them sign off that, yes, they agreed to this amount before you do the work. And that way, there's no question of, did they understand it was for this much? Did they understand if you worked an extra hour today, it would be this much more? If it's not signed and if it's not in writing, then no, they didn't. Even if you say, well, we had a handshake agreement. Well, we agreed to it word of mouth, No, it doesn't count. If you ever watch shows like Judge Judy or one of the million other shows that popped up from that show, or the court shows nowadays, where the people are real, the cases are real, and the rulings are final, right? It's hilarious, actually. But if you ever watch those shows, I don't think I've ever, I don't watch them all the time. I know my family watches them all the time, but I don't think I've ever seen a court case on there where someone goes up and says, here's the signed contract against the defendant that the defendant signed before this service was provided. Here's a signed contract. I don't think I've ever heard that on one of those shows, even if it's just a little legal pad contract that you write up handwritten, it doesn't have to look professional. But having it in writing beforehand is how the New York City new law works. You have to have it in writing. And I think that's fair. Because I would never, ever have work done for me. And I hire freelancers all the time. But I would never have work done if I didn't know how much it was going to cost beforehand. For instance, let's just say a very simple thing like I have a plumber coming in and I don't know, fixing my faucet or something. Something stupid, right? But something that I may not know how to do, right? Or I have my heating guy come in and clean my furnace, right? I would never have that guy come in until I knew, here's how much it's going to cost. Now, if there's a problem, I understand, that he might say to me, well, by the way, I found this issue and here's how much it's going to be to fix it. But I would want to know that there's going to be an extra charge before he goes ahead and does that work. And I think that's something freelancers have to understand here is, if you have work done, you should know how much it's going to be before you have the work done. If you're one of those freelancers, and maybe that's part of the issue in New York City where 70% report issues, but sometimes freelancers just do the work and then invoice them later. I don't think that's fair. I think you should know what you're getting into before you get into it. And so while part of this law, a majority of this law, helps freelancers collect, the other side of it is it helps customers know the price beforehand and helps them have this thing in writing before they get the work done for them. Now, there are certain situations where, let's say you hire a freelancer all the time. You work with John Smith every day, you hire him, and eventually he stops, having you sign a contract before the day begins. Let's say, eventually you get to a friendly relationship where, I call him and say, we're going to be at this location tomorrow. Can you join us? And you know what his day rate is. If his day rate changes, then he should let me know. But I already know what his day rate's going to be. Just invoice from me later, right? There are going to be certain situations where you kind of have this trust between you. And I think that has to be accounted for in the law too, which, according to what I've read, that isn't covered. I think there are other situations where paying on a 30-day basis isn't always going to happen. For instance, certain customers of mine pay 50% up front and then 50% once the job's completed and I give them the final product, right? Perfectly fine, right? Other customers, they are on that 30-day policy of net 30, or even net 60. And I think that has to be in writing, so both if you understand that's going to be a situation. There's other customers where, I don't know if I've had it recently, but I know it does happen where sometimes the customer doesn't have that much money up front. Or like if you're working for a government agency or something, they should have a big budget behind them, or enough of a big bank account behind them to say, we can pay this much, and that's no problem for us. The check's going to clear, But there's other customers where sometimes you're working for, I don't know, a mom and pop shop, or sometimes you're working for a family or something, and, even though what you're charging is completely fair for your industry, I think sometimes you have to write a contract in a different way of like, you can make payments to me every week you can make a payment. Every month you can make a payment or whatever. I think there are certain situations where it's okay to have a payment plan, But if that's so, it should be in writing beforehand. So maybe this law should cover that kind of situation of, it's if they don't pay within 30 days, you can enact this law. Unless it was in writing and agreed upon by both parties beforehand that there's going to be a payment plan, or that there's going to be a net 60 on the contract instead of a net 30. I think it has to cover that kind of stuff, and that's something that this law isn't covering at the moment as far as what I can see. But at least it's a first step in the right direction. I don't think it's perfect yet. I don't think any law that was first enacted is perfect. But I think it still has some work to be done on it. But I also think it should be rolled out countrywide. And every state should be jumping on board to this. And this should set a precedent for the rest of the country and saying, we, New York City, think that freelancers are a valid career path for our workforce. 1/3 of our workforce is doing this. We want to back them up with the law that says what they're doing is valid, and we want to back them up and enable them to use our laws to their advantage. The rest of the country needs to do this, but they also need to work on the law to cover other things that are specific situations. Unless it's in writing, 30 days, so on and so forth. So, if you don't mind, please do contact your local lawmakers, even if it's just in your town. Go to a council meeting and talk to your mayor and say, this is a law that's amazing. I want it to be in our town. I want our town to be the next president. I want our town to be a shining glimmer of hope for the world, right? It's a little far, but you know what I'm saying, right? So please do contact your local lawmakers at the state level, at the local level, and ask them to at least look at this law and hopefully enact it for your town or your state. It's incredible, and I really encourage looking at this law. So what I'm going to do is in the link of this video, in the description of this video, I'm going to leave a link to the Gothamist article on this law. And in that, you can read more about the law itself and the benefits of it. You can also, I believe there's a link on our actual article to the actual law that they passed put in effect May 15th, 2017. You can actually read the entire law if you want. I highly encourage you read it. I highly encourage you read this article. It's an incredible law that I fully support. And it's just amazing to finally have this whole career path as a valid way of doing things. There's finally laws to protect people like you and I. Maybe not protecting you because you're an employee at the moment. But if you work with freelancers, you know how hard it is. If you're a freelancer yourself, you especially know how hard it is to be a freelancer and collect from your customers every day. So please, contact your local lawmakers, have them read the bill. Thank you for joining us on VLAMP. This was episode 93 of the show, season 5 already. My gosh. The next episode, by the way, we are recording right after this, so you're going to see me in the same exact clothing. I'm sorry. But that episode is going to be on legal advice for freelancers. So we're going to be diving even deeper into this pool of legal world. And so I highly encourage watching that. That'll be out very shortly on this channel. So please do hit that red subscribe button. If you're on Facebook, by the way, we're posting these on Facebook as well. Go to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe. You're going to love all the content that's on there. There are 93 episodes on that YouTube channel that you can watch that will help you in this video, lighting, audio, music, and photography worlds. It's a great channel, and I hope you guys subscribe to it. So thank you all for joining us here today on VLAMP. I am your host, Matt Haslam, and I'll see you next time. Bye. But if you live in Seattle, in Seattle